Big Four interviews can feel overwhelming, but we've made it simple for you. We took our 4 best interview prep videos and put them all in one place, helping you feel more prepared and confident for your upcoming interview.
What's up guys, it's Mike from Job English. Today we're going to be talking about how to pass the first round interview for Deloitte. Deloitte is the biggest of the Big Four professional services company, namely being Deloitte, EY, KPMG and PwC, racking up over $50 billion in annual revenue and employing over 300,000 people worldwide. Deloitte derives over 40% of its income from consulting, making it also one of the world's largest consulting companies, something that I often bring up for young people who want to break into consulting but want to look outside the traditional management consulting firms. Deloitte also generates over half its revenue from North and South America, but has a significant presence in over 150 countries. Today we're going to be talking about Deloitte's first round interview, which could be one of two things. It could be a day in the life job simulation, which is very similar to Deloitte's previous job simulations over the past 2 years, as we've been covering Deloitte on YouTube since 2020. And that's probably going to be if you're a graduate, an intern, or looking to get an apprenticeship at Deloitte. However, if you're a professional looking to work at Deloitte, then most likely you're going to have a first round telephone interview, maybe video, maybe face-to-face. So we're going to be looking at questions that could come up in either of these scenarios, and I'm going to be giving you some background about how to think about answering these questions and what you should do to prepare. As ever, if you want more help preparing for your Deloitte video interview, then check out our Deloitte Pass the Interview pack down in the description below. Or if you want to speak to yours truly and prepare one-to-one, click the link down below and book a one-to-one call with me. One thing that I'm going to do at the end of this video is I'm also going to go through and talk about situational judgment questions which could come up for Deloitte and how to think about answering them, and also how to think about approaching mini case studies which seem to feature more and more in candidates who have accepted offers for Deloitte this year in 2024, as this is something that I've seen more and more of in recent years. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some common questions that we came up for Deloitte first round interviews. Also going to talk about how to answer situational judgment based type questions based around workplace scenarios. I'm going to walk you through a 6-step format which has worked really well with our customers for our digital products to help them simplify this process, because a lot of people really struggle with situational judgment questions. So if you're struggling with this, it's really not just you. This is probably the most difficult online test and type of video question that a lot of people really kind of find confusing and don't know how to answer this in a good way. I'm also going to touch briefly on case studies and business emails, as this is certainly a trend that I'm seeing more and more for Deloitte in 2024 when I was looking back from people who have successfully gone through the interview process and accepted an offer at Deloitte. So let's start off with 8 common questions that we came up against going through memories for the Deloitte interview. Question number 1, tell me about yourself. Now, I've gone into this subject in great detail before, laying out a really simple 6-step format for you, which is who are you and where are you now? What did you do before? What would you like to do? Work experience, extracurricular skills and volunteering, and finally, hobbies and interests. And if you'd like a more in-depth video of this with a free worksheet that you can download, then make sure you click the link up above. So the really important thing for a personal introduction, and I'm going to differentiate a little bit between a graduate and a professional. Now for a graduate, your personal introductions are going to be reasonably similar. So you're currently studying at a university, you previously would have been at secondary school or high school, or at another university, you want to do the job that is at this company, you'll have a limited amount of work experience. If you don't have work experience, don't worry, just talk about what extracurricular activities that you've done or any volunteering that you've carried out. If you're worried about this and you're watching this and you're thinking about having the interview in the future, it's certainly something that I recommend that you have. Employers are definitely going to be looking to see where is it that you've actually applied the skills that you're going to be needing for this job. And finally, ending on skills and interest. And I always like to say end with a bang, end with something that's going to trigger a conversation or spark a point of view. Like, you know, I also really enjoy writing poetry online, I'm a really keen amateur golfer. This is something that kind of leaves what I call a little bit of a hook or a bit of a question mark. And particularly if you're having a face-to-face interview, it's a great way to start a conversation so that people can get to know you and maybe move it away from a standard interview format, which can be quite tricky, particularly for graduates or people who've not done a lot of interviews. However, if you're a professional, you're going to kind of want to frame this a little bit differently. I deal with this a lot when I am talking to particularly senior professionals. What a lot of professionals struggle with is how to summarize their experience. Say you have 5, 10, 20 plus years of experience, and I tend to say try to summarize that in a single sentence as soon as you begin. Hi, my name's Mike. I have 19 years of technology consulting experience, working at Accenture, IBM, and a range of small businesses on a contract basis, helping with applications and websites which have reached tens of millions of users. Now you can see what I've done there is really get somebody to buy into my personal introduction and to show interest. A theme that I like to bring out is, sort of thinking, how can I maintain somebody's attention or interest when I'm delivering a personal introduction? And I think something that's really important is just to think about what is a way that I can really encapsulate to you that I'm a serious guy. I'm somebody who knows what they're doing, I'm somebody who has a large amount of experience, and I'm definitely somebody who can do this job that you're looking for. So that's a different way to think about a personal introduction if you're a professional. One thing that I would say is, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, a personal introduction is a wonderful place to start for your interview. It's something that I always get people started on whenever I do one-to-ones, particularly if you're nervous about interviews or you haven't had a lot of practice for interviews. You can download the free worksheet, which is actually in the description below under Application Success Secrets, which is how to get your first, next or last interview. It's full of loads of free handouts which should really help you, particularly if you're just getting started in the application process. Write out your answer in that worksheet and then just start to practice your answer once a day, print it out, put it somewhere where it's really obvious that you can see it as you're walking past. I'm a big believer in visual prompts or visual cues. So very often when we have a busy life and we kind of forget the things that we need to do, visual prompts are a great way, like on the kitchen cupboard, on the fridge, on the bathroom door, just somewhere where you're going to see it and go, right, let me do my personal introduction, because practice really does make the difference between an okay personal introduction and something that's really going to grab your audience's attention. Question number 2, why do you want to work for Deloitte? Now, this is a classic interview question that you're probably going to get whatever the style of interview that you're having. First of all, what is the employer looking for? They're really just looking to see if you've taken any time to research into the company. Why are you particularly motivated to work for us above and beyond the obvious, which is, I just want a job, I just want to get paid, I just want to, So why do they ask this question? Well, they're looking for somebody who's just done their homework. Now, as somebody who has carried out quite a lot of interviews for different companies that I've managed or I've run, one of the first questions that I ask is, why us? Why not somebody else? What I'm not really looking for is somebody to say, well, I just want a job and I just want to pay the bills. I want to see somebody who's a little bit motivated, who's done a little bit of homework, because how you do anything is how you do everything. And this is a question that you could really take, 5-10 minutes, looking at their annual report, looking at some recent white papers. Deloitte, because they have such a large consulting division as a global company, have some really brilliant white papers that they put out on a regular basis. There's lots of information, or if you want, just take some of the facts like I did out of our Deloitte Pass the Interview pack, where we churn out about 100 facts for every single company, so you're not getting the same facts as everybody else. You're looking for 5 or 6 facts here, whatever's going to fit into a 2-minute answer. And to make this answer really as good as possible, I'd say relate something personally to yourself. I'm so interested in working for Deloitte Consulting because you are one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. 40% of your revenue is derived from consulting, and I feel that this would be a great place for me to grow in my digital transformation consulting skills. So this is a really good example of just weaving a fact in to have something to do with you. One thing that you don't want to do so much is really base it all around you. Well, it'd be a great opportunity for me. I'd get the chance to learn. I'd get to do this. I'd get to do that. A company doesn't really care about what you're going to get from it. The company cares about what you've taken the time to learn and demonstrating that you've put that 15 minutes to just go and find a couple of unique facts about the company. Question number 3, why do you want to do this job? Why this team? Why is this job right for you? I'm giving a couple of different variations for this question because I find sometimes people will kind of pause and go, well, are they asking me the same question? Are they asking me the different question? But this is a basic 2-step process. So first of all, just tell them what you would do. So as a tax analyst, I would be expected to liaise with clients on a regular basis, liaise with HMRC and the bank, and so on and so forth, right? What I'm really demonstrating to the employer or to the algorithm if I'm being analysed by HireVue, Modern Hire, or one of those SaaS companies that are carrying out the one-way interview process, is I understand the skills that are required to do the job. This is particularly important for a video interview because essentially what they're going to do is they're going to take everything that you say, they're going to pass it into text, and then they're going to analyze those texts and be looking out for particular words that you have said to demonstrate that you understand and are a good fit for the job. So that's the first half of your answer. The second half is about picking out 2 or 3 key skills that you feel are really important. So is that attention to detail? Is that teamwork, leadership, collaboration? And just providing a very brief example about where you collaborated, where you had good teamwork, leadership, financial analysis skills. I've got great financial analysis skills because I've actually spent 3 years being a member of our asset management society at university. Just a little something that says, look, I'm not just saying it, this is something that I am genuinely good at. And this is going to offer a really complete answer to this question. One thing that I noticed going through the memories for this interview and for this process for 2024 is that a lot of people, particularly later on down the line, were being asked more in-depth questions about why this role. Professional services companies are looking for high-level knowledge workers. These are people who have a high level of technical skill and knowledge around a very specific niche or subject. So therefore, something that you really want to think about is, do I really understand this role? Do I understand the qualification that I need? Do I understand what's happening in the industry? Have I actually read about the company and their white papers to see what challenges their clients are facing right now? Again, a little bit of homework, 20, 30 minutes is going to make all the difference between you and somebody else who really doesn't know what job it is that they're going to be doing, and they're going to be filtered out of that process very quickly. Question number 4, walk me through a moment when you faced a challenge and what you did to overcome it. This is a great question that I really quite like because there are 2 reasons. Number 1, you get to see what that person actually feels as a challenge, and also you get to see how adaptable and flexible they are. One of the keystone skills, particularly for a young person going into a new role, is to think, how resilient are they? How flexible are they to change? Because business is messy, clients change their mind, deadlines change. Any professional watching this video can attest that things very rarely go from A to B. And as they say, the best plan only lasts until first contact. So when you're talking about a challenge, make sure it's something that's really clear and easy to understand. And also, what are the consequences if you do not overcome this challenge? Good challenges I like is like a change of specification for a job or for a project, a change of deadline. Perhaps you've had a team member who isn't pulling their weight, already all of a sudden has a personal situation which had come up and therefore they're not able to engage in the project and what they're doing, and you suddenly find yourself faced with this challenge to be able to go and get a result. Now, when you're talking about how you overcome this challenge, something I often say to people is, don't just tell me what it is, teach me. So teach me, if I had to go through the same challenge as you, the step-by-step process that I would need to take in order to fix this challenge. It's much like teaching somebody to cook. You're not just going to say, go and bake me a chocolate cake. You're going to say, right, here's the recipe, here's the things that you need, you're going to have to buy, here's the steps that you're going to have to take one after the other, because otherwise you're going to end up being frustrated. That person is going to produce a chocolate cake which is completely different to yours. And that's a very good way of thinking about how to answer this question. Question 5. Can you give me a time when you had to use data to solve a complex problem? So this is more and more of a common question, for example, for consulting, but also for audit and tax and deals, because more and more a knowledge worker's job, particularly in a professional services company, is driven by data, it's driven by numbers, it's driven by lots of different points that are having to be unified in one place, cleaned, analysed, and then for you to give a decision. Some important things to think about when answering this question is, first of all, how much data did you have? Where did you get that data from? How did you decide how you were going to analyze that data? Now, bearing in mind, when I'm talking about data, sometimes people who are non-technical start to get a little bit freaked out, but it could just be an Excel table. It could just be, a series of sources for a university essay. This is all data. It doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of numbers. But again, what you want to be thinking about is the systematic process of, how did you find this data? How can you tell if it's reliable? How do you clean, filter, and sort that data? And how do you come to an opinion based upon that data? How can you fact check yourself? Also, how can you make sure that this is genuinely helpful in terms of the result that you need to achieve? Question number 6, describe your biggest weakness. Now, by far and away, apart from tell me about yourself, describe your biggest weakness is probably one of the most hated interview questions, particularly for young people and for graduates. And I think most people really struggle with this question because it encourages you to be a little bit vulnerable. It encourages you to show a side that is not so good to your potential employer. And people really struggle to think, well, what exactly is it that I should choose out? Now, for me, choosing a biggest weakness is definitely something that isn't going to compromise your integrity to do that job. For example, saying, I'm often late, I like to have a drink during the daytime. Sometimes I get a bit angry and hit people and stuff. Probably don't say that. But what you can do, and what I personally encourage, is for you to lean into a little bit of honesty. Maybe you're a little bit disorganized. Maybe you struggle to say no. Maybe at times you haven't been such a good listener, because the most important thing is you're not just delivering a weakness and just going and saying, I'm a terrible listener. Sorry, what did you say? You're basically saying, there was a time when I really wasn't that great at listening. Our professor was talking one day about an essay that was due in, and I must admit, I kind of wandered off and was looking at my phone. However, 3 days later, I received an email to ask me where my essay was. When I sent back an email back to my professor saying, I don't know what you mean, the essay is due in a week's time, he replied saying, no, I said in the class twice that the essay is due in today. Where is your essay? Now, thankfully, as a result, and being honest with my professor and saying I wasn't listening and I hadn't paid attention, he gave me an extension. But from then on, I made sure that whenever I was doing something, whether that be engaged in learning or my job or my extracurricular activities, I would try to just do one thing at one time, because I'm not very good at multitasking. And this is something that I carry on to do today. So as you can see, it is a bit of a weakness. It's probably not a great look. It's a mistake that you made, but you've learned from that mistake. You have improved and you're now better at it. Question number 7, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, the short answer is here with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be with you forever. I'm going to join this company and I'm just going to be here forever until I die. Now, whether that's the truth or not, and it probably isn't, because you're probably going to go and do something else. And 5 years is a really long time, particularly if you're a graduate, doesn't really matter. What they're looking for is a little bit of a nuance to this, is just to say, well, would you have qualified? What exam would you have done? Where would you be in the hierarchy? Would you be a manager, a senior associate? What are you likely to be doing? Will you be niching down into a particular subject, for example, in banking? So you're going to be concentrating on a particular market or mechanism. What do you think that you'd be doing? And also, what is your understanding of the role and how it progresses? Something not to do, which I've heard a lot, is people say, well, I probably would have moved home. I would have started my own business. I'd be somewhere else. And it's just an instant red flag for an employer. Now, bearing in mind, there will be people saying, well, yeah, but, this is so stupid. And, of course I won't be here in 5 years and so much can change. Look, you're just doing the dance and you're just playing the game. You just need to get through to the next level of the game. So therefore, just play within the rules. Okay? Question number 8, how do you build and maintain relationships? Now, relationship and network building type questions is something new for Deloitte. I've not seen this a lot. I used to see this quite a lot for PwC, And really what it relates to is particularly around consulting, but also for all forms of professional services work. The reason being is sooner or later you're going to have to start engaging with clients, speaking to them, extracting information from them. Certainly anybody who goes to work in audit and tax and they speak to their seniors or people in the industry to know that there is a big dance to be had for trying to chase down documents, to get answers, to get people to respond to emails, and it's a big thing, right? So being able to get the best out of people is a really useful skill to have. A few things to think about with this is, number one, if no one's ever told you, no one cares about you, they only care about themselves. And what I mean by that is humans are predominantly selfish creatures, particularly when they are busy. So if somebody tries to approach you to get you to do something and you're really busy, the chances are you're going to say no. However, humans are incentives driven creatures. So if you approach somebody and say, could you do this thing for me? And they say no, then you say, but I will give you something, or I will help you with something in a gesture of reciprocity. Then all of a sudden things change because that person then becomes incentivized to do things. Now, I'm sure inevitably there might be somebody who drops a comment below, but actually I'd help anyone to do anything. You're just not busy enough. So believe me when I say that there are lots of people who would like me to help them, and I genuinely would like to help them as well, but I just don't have enough time and I have to sleep and eat and actually have some sort of social life. So learning how to build and maintain relationships, it's all about, how did you go from first point of contact to the next one to the next one? And it could be a team of students that you worked with. It could be a team that you worked with in your office. It could just be somebody in your personal life. But a lot of times, what are the foundational cornerstones of relationship building? Well, it's integrity. It's about giving rather than taking. And it's about listening to other people and delivering on the promises that you have made. So I wanted to talk about situation-based questions and also business emails. This is something that we've seen come up quite a lot in the day in the life scenario-based job simulation, which is basically where you're given either a business case to analyze or just a series of emails that you have to go through and talk about what happens. So I want to start off by giving you an example question that's just taken from an SJT practice based around this sort of subject, then a 6-step format to think about and how you would go about answering these types of questions. So here's the question. It's 9 AM on Monday morning and you're checking your inbox where you find 3 new emails. The first email is from your team manager asking you to complete a report started by another intern which must go to the client by the end of the day. The second email is from the department manager requesting all personnel to attend a meeting regarding new department regulations. This meeting will take place between 10 and 11 AM. The third email is from James, your teammate, with whom you're working on an important project due to be finished by the end of the week. You're in the data analysis stage and James wants to set a time for a meeting today to go over the data you've collected. You just remembered you've also been asked to attend a meeting today with your team manager between 4 and 6 PM. What would you do and why? Now, this could be done in the form of a written response, but it is a situational based question. So here's a 6-step framework for you to think about in terms of answering this question, which is something that is in our SJT Sorted course, which is in the Deloitte Pass the Interview pack. So I call this is actually the second step in a 3-step process. So then broken down, step 2, what's the context? So number 1, who's involved? 2, what do they need? 3, who gets priority if there is more than one person? 4, what are your responsibilities and obligations? 5, what is your position and the extent of your authority? 6, what is the wider context of the role you're applying to in real life? So let's have a look at this. So who is involved? Well, there's you, your team manager, the department manager, who I'm assuming is higher than the team manager, and also your colleague, James. So that's who's involved. What do they need? Well, your team manager has asked you to complete a report by the end of the day. The department manager has asked you to attend a new meeting at 10 to 11 AM. James wants to set a meeting for today to go over the data, and you've got a meeting between 4 and 6 PM. So who gets priority? Well, the department manager gets priority in terms of general hierarchy. What are your responsibilities and obligations? Well, just to be a good member of the team. and help everybody out. What is your position in the extent of your authority? Well, I'm assuming you're a graduate, so there is no real extent of authority. And what is the wider context of the role you're applying to in real life? Well, basically that, business is messy, days can be varied, and you're going to have to sort of, muck in with everything that you need to do. So probably the first thing that you want to do is just confirm to your manager that you'll have the report done by the end of the day, which then all of a sudden means that your end of the day is, if you want to get out of the office by 4 to 6 p.m, then you need to get that report done prior to that. The second email is about the meeting for the department manager, so you'll reply saying that you'll book that in, and that takes out 10 to 11 a.m. So the third email is from James, with whom you're working on an important project. So you say, in terms of a meeting for today, well, you could probably either do, sort of 2 to 3 p.m. or after hours, because you've also got this report to do. The only thing that is deadline sensitive for today, because the meetings you just turn up, right? So what's deadline sensitive is you're just going to have to make sure that you go through the report that the intern's done first of all. So you would do that between 9 and 10 a.m. so that if there's any mistakes, any questions, you can email the intern there and then and CC in your manager and saying, "Hi Steve, please can we sit down at this time if possible, because this is a report that I'm due to complete of yours today and I have some questions that I need answers." That then leaves you, all things being well and good, any time between 11 and 4 to resolve the work that you have to do for your manager, to meet with James, and also to complete any other work that needs to get done. One thing to think about whenever answering sort of situational based questions is just do it one step at a time. The reason why I like to break stuff down into frameworks and almost just to doodle out who's involved is very often people get carried away or give quite unrealistic answers. So they'll say, well, I'd stay as late as I needed to and possibly sleep there and stay there a week. It's like, dude, no, you're not going to do that. And also that's not sustainable. That's just poor time management. So ultimately you're kind of saying, right, it's 9 a.m. now. Maybe I can get away by 6 p.m. I've got 9 hours plus minus lunch. How can I organise my time as effectively as possible to get everything done that I need to get done for other people, and then breaking it down like that. And I find going through those 6 steps to be really helpful in terms of simplifying that process. When thinking about how to write a business email, there is a 2-page handout that I always give to people who are going through this. Now, a business email is quite different from just a regular email, like a LOL email, or sending GIFs or memes or sort of one-word responses. And probably a lot of you don't even do personal email because you'll do messaging through your phone or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever you guys use these days. So here's how to think about a business email, which is basically introduction, middle, end. So the introduction is who are you talking to and what are you talking to them about. The middle is covering the points and the context of the conversation, and the end is to talk about what do we do next? What's the resolution from this? So are you basically, do they have to reply to you? Do they have to find something? Do they have to agree something with you? That's how you end it, and also how would they get in touch with you? And that's a good way to think about writing a business email. 1 paragraph, 1 point, or even writing it in bullet points is absolutely fine. Now finally, I just wanted to talk about the case studies. Now something that came up is these were sort of 10 to 20 minute case studies. Down in the past interview pack, there is a case study breakdown for beginners where I go through step by step how to solve a case study. But some pointers that I want to give to you, particularly if you're not familiar with case studies. Number one, the mathematics isn't going to be that complicated. So if you're not numerical, don't freak out. That's what a lot of people freak out about. Number two, make sure you understand the question. So a lot of people, when they get the case study, won't actually understand or answer all of the questions. They'll kind of read the first question, freak out, try to read everything, and then fail because they hadn't answered the other 2 questions that needed to get asked. Number 3, when you're going through the material, don't read it like a book. So skim through read through the material really quickly, and be aware that some of it is relevant and some of it may not be relevant, and you probably don't have time to read it all. Number 4, have a notepad or something down by your side that you can make notes with. That's going to make your life a lot easier. Particularly, you have to deliver an oral presentation, or even if you have to write an email to respond to that case study, then you've got notes, numbers, keywords, names, stuff that you can refer to and easily put into your email. And number 5, complete is better than anything else. So generally what we're looking for whenever I test somebody through case studies is I want them first of all to just complete it, then to have good content, and then for it to be, you know, actually concise and clear. But that takes some time. The most difficult thing initially is just to complete within the time. Your biggest enemy will be time. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Ready English here to help you get hired, and today we're going to be talking about one of the big 4 professional services companies, EY, and how you can pass their first round interview. So who is EY? EY employs over 400,000 people in over 150 countries. They are the 3rd largest of the big 4 professional services companies globally, coming behind PwC and Deloitte, but in front of KPMG. And as a global entity, they earned over $50 billion last year. EY offers the first of its kind EY Tech MBA, which it does in collaboration with Holt Business School, and this year became carbon negative, on its way to becoming carbon neutral in 2025. So what can you expect from the EY interview process? As we've spoken about before, this will vary between graduates and professionals. If you're a professional, you're much more likely to be interviewed on the phone, via video or face-to-face, but that will be done in real life. But we're going to zero in a little bit more about what you can expect from the video interview. We're going to cover the 6 most common questions that you can expect to come across. And I'm also going to be covering a framework to answer situational judgment test questions, which has proven really helpful and is a good thing for you to learn because you're probably going to need it when you apply for PwC, for Deloitte and for KPMG, which you're going to be doing all at the same time. Now just remember, if you want to find out more information about this guide for EY, check out the link down in the description below. So what can you expect from EY's video interview? We've spent the time to go through recent candidate experiences from 2024 who actually accepted an offer at EY. And one of them described the online video test or job simulation as this: an online interview consisting of a written exercise or drafting an email, 4 video interview questions and some situational judgment questions. In the video interview, you had 2 minutes to think of an answer and 2 minutes to say your answer. So if you're sitting there thinking about how long your script should be, it's going to be roughly about 200 words, about 100 words per minute. You might speak a bit slower or a bit faster, but that's a good thing for you to aim for and have a constraint around if you're sitting there writing out your scripts. So here are the 6 most common questions that we came across when we're going through past interview experiences from candidates who had accepted an offer at EY. Question number 1. What attracts you to EY? Now, you will have just heard my little introduction about EY, who they are and why it's important, and you will have noticed that I included 5 or 6 key and unique facts which are relevant to the business. Now, this is really the way that you want to think about preparing your answer for why EY, or in fact why any company. Make sure you go and read their annual report. And for most companies, their annual reports will stretch to 100 or 200 pages or more. But here's a little trick. All you need to do is read the chairman's statement or the CEO's statement, and they're going to give you all the goodies. And generally what's going to happen is a company will present all of the best figures, best projects, the best clients, the best things very early on in the annual report, and some pretty little tables and graphs. And you can use that to take the most relevant information for you. If you want to deliver a little bit more depth to this answer, then you might pick out one thing you like about EY which personally relates to you. It could be your gender, it could be your ethnicity, it could be your personal background, it could be something that EY is doing which really interests you in terms of technology or ESG. Whatever it is, you can take that and then relate yourself to that and why it's important. Question number 2, why this role? So whatever role that you're applying to, this is one of those questions that you should always expect to be asked. Why do you want to work in tax? Why do you want to work in audit? And the way that you don't want to answer this question is just, it's really interesting and I'm really keen and excited and I'd work really hard and this would be a great opportunity for me. This is a very selfish answer to give, because essentially you're just talking about yourself and why you're awesome. What you really want to think about is answering this question in a 2-part answer. Number 1, what would you do in the job? Now, it's a really good idea for you to have a job description to hand which you can refer to, particularly if you're doing your interview in a one-way video interview where you're being asked questions. You've got some time to prepare and then you can answer. Now, one thing to recognize about video interviews in particular, which are being analyzed by some sort of AI, is they're going to be looking out to pick out particular keywords or phrases that they can then go away and say, this person seems to be a really good match. And one of the most likely things that they're going to be looking for is going to be keywords or phrases which come from the job description. So use the first part of your answer, just describe what would you do, what would be your daily duties, what would be the types of things that you would experience, would be out of the office, in the office, do you need to know particular software, particular technical knowledge, and you can just mention that in passing. The second part of your answer is really picking out 2 or 3 key skills which you believe are fundamentally important for the job, and just providing a short amount of proof that you are good at those things. For example, you could say, one of the things that I'm really great at is Excel. I know that this will be really important in my job as an auditor, as I've actually used Excel for the last 5 years, both at A-level and also for my undergraduate degree, and I can do everything from macros to VBAs and all of those advanced functions in Excel. Question number 3, give me the latest piece of news around your chosen job. Now, one thing that you always want to be aware of doing, and this is particularly true for EY, because in the partner interview, which tends to be separate from the assessment center, you're going to be asked to give a presentation and prepare a PowerPoint which is specific to your division and what you're going to be doing. Now, keeping up to date to business and industry news doesn't have to mean that you read the Financial Times every day or you've got Bloomberg on in the background. It's really just something as simple as signing up to a weekly newsletter for your industry. So that could be for audit, for tax, for consulting. It could be through ICAEW. It could be through Accountancy Age. Whatever it is, just making sure that you're keeping up to date and you have a recent piece of news that you can speak on. And by recent, we mean in the next 3 months. And by speak on, we basically mean something that you can explain to a child, and you could also answer questions based on that subject. And if you want to be a little bit more in-depth about how you answer this question, then why don't you give a forward-looking outlook about how this piece of news would affect EY's clients or EY as a whole. Question number 4, what would you do to ensure that stakeholders were engaged in the project that you were currently working on? Now, this is a really good opportunity to just go off on a little bit of a side quest and talk about how to answer situational judgment test questions. If you click down in the link in the description below and go to see the full written guide, which is on our website, jobreadyenglish.com, you'll see that within that guide is reference to a course called SJT Sorted. Now, situational judgment tests are actually the type of online test that most people struggle with because it's interpretive based upon the language, and also there is a presumption that you have had some form of work experience. So what I want to give you now is a 6-step framework to think about how to answer situational judgment test questions, which forms the part of our course SJT Sorted. So this actually comes as part of a 3-part framework. Part number 2 is what's the context, so who's involved? What do they need? Who gets priority if there is more than one person? What are your responsibilities and obligations? What is your position and extent of your authority? And what is the wider context, the role you're applying to in real life? So how do you keep stakeholders engaged? Well, you communicate with them. You set out expectations, you ask them if they have any questions, you make yourself available. And probably something that we've all experienced, and this doesn't have to be in the workplace, is, you know, a time when you've complained about something or you've got an issue that needs to be solved straight away. Something that frustrates all of us is when somebody says they're going to get back to us and they don't. So just having open and clear lines of communication and expectations, even if the communication is just to say, look, we're still working on it. It's something that's still going on. I'm sure that this is something that we can all appreciate and we have experienced in our daily lives. Question number 5, what does building a better working world mean to you? Now, about 7 or 8 years ago, EY made a massive drive to double its headcount, double its revenue, all under the banner of building a better working world. Now, this is something, a link that we will provide in the guide down in the link in the description below. But essentially it's kind of driven by this purpose of the 3 values, which is people who demonstrate integrity, respect, learning and inclusiveness, people with energy, enthusiasm, and the courage to lead, people who build relationships based on doing the right thing. So what does building a better working world mean to you? It could mean better collaboration, helping others, demonstrating leadership, throwing energy and enthusiasm into new activities, which is an experience that you can draw from yourself using situation, task, action, result, using an example from your working life or your extracurricular life, or if you don't have that experience, from your academic life, and then applying that based upon those 3 values. And finally, question number 6, what was your biggest setback and how did you overcome it? Now, when we're talking about a setback or a challenge, one thing that I often say to people is it's got to be something that's significant. It's not like I went to the shop and there was no milk and I didn't know what to do and had a meltdown. So it could be maybe something that's like, I didn't get the university that I chose. I failed an exam. I was late getting something in. I had to put in some extra hours because I was doing evening and weekend work while I was at university. So one thing that I think is really helpful for trying to answer this question is trying to teach somebody how to do that thing. Now, I often say to people there's a difference between saying what you did and teaching somebody how to do something. So if you had this big setback or challenge and you're laying it out in the STAR format, so you talk about, when was it, where were you, what were you doing, what was the setback, and then really talking about the steps that you took to overcome that challenge. And by doing that, you'll find it really easy, number 1, to answer this question effectively, give it some reasonable content, to tell a decent story, and to give specifics and detail. This is a great place to start if you've got an interview for KPMG. In this video, I'm going to give you an introduction about who KPMG is, including some fast facts you can use in your answer as to why you want to work for KPMG. I'm going to talk you through the application process and how it differs for graduates and professionals. I'm going to walk through 7 common questions that we came across from our research based upon applicants who have been successful in their interview and taken an offer from KPMG. And then I'm going to talk about what you can do next to best prepare for your upcoming interview. So let's talk about KPMG and what makes them great. KPMG is one of the big 4 professional services companies alongside PwC, Deloitte, and EY. They service 83% of the Fortune 500 companies, and they have over 270,000 staff. These staff are based in 650 locations in 147 countries. KPMG's Family for Literacy program has distributed over 5 million books to low-income households and the children within them. KPMG ranked 4th in the Social Mobility Employers Index in the UK and has been in the top 10 in the last 5 years. KPMG has also been named as one of the top companies for gender equity, which means the equivalency of pay and rights for men and women within its organisation, and has been in that list for the last 13 years. Guys, before we carry on with this video, I just want to ask you a small favour. Would you consider, if you've enjoyed this video, clicking the like button, dropping us a comment down below to let us know how we're doing, what company you'd like us to make a video about, or what you've got coming up, and maybe even subscribing to the channel to help us reach more people. Thank you. So what can you expect from KPMG's application process? It is going to be different as compared to a professional and a graduate. And it is worth saying, I'm based in the UK. So I am basing a lot of my experience based upon the UK process. Though it is fair to say, based upon the consulting that I've done since 2015, that most MNCs or multinational companies have very similar application processes across the globe. For a professional, it's really common for you to expect a series of interviews. The first one would be a HR screener interview. Maybe somebody picked your CV off of LinkedIn, or you've been referred by a recruiter, or you've applied directly to the company. You would then progress through the hierarchy of that division or business unit to speak to a business manager, a director, or even a partner. And you should probably expect 2 or 3 interviews before you get the job. If you're a graduate applying to work for KPMG, this process is a little bit different. You'll have to do some sort of online test, which in this case is maths and personality based, though there is no time limit on this. You then have to sit an online virtual assessment, which is called Transforming Small Businesses. This is what is known as an online job simulation Online job simulations are basically a screen where you have numerous questions and tabs where you're almost acting like a member of the business. You could be expected to answer numerical questions, situational judgment test style questions, reply to emails, even reply to. Now, a couple of those questions will be in the form of video interviews where you will have a question displayed on screen and have to reply with your answer. And you can expect this to last anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Once you finish with this, then you'd be asked to attend an assessment center, which at KPMG is known as a virtual launchpad. Now, generally this tends to only have 3 items which appear in it, which is the general meet and greet, the group discussion, and the individual exercise, which could be a case study or a written exercise. And that's what you can expect across the whole process. Now, how long will this take? It really depends on the role and where you're applying to in terms of geographical location. But I would say, as a rule of thumb, you would want to allow 1 to 3 months. Graduates tends to be slightly longer because it's tranched within particular intakes and there are a number of people coming in to do the same position at the same level. Whereas for professionals, this could be much faster, particularly if there is a high demand within the business to get this position filled. Now, of course, whenever we put videos like this together and do our research, we try our best to meet as many different people's needs, but we are being reasonably general in the information that we are providing, in the hopes that it can help as many people as possible. So here are the 7 most common questions that we came across for KPMG's interview for 2024. This was based upon research online from candidates who had reported as interviewing at KPMG this year and accepting an offer at KPMG. Now, I feel that this is really important because these are people who have been through the entire process and can report as accurately as anything can be taken based upon information on the internet from a non-verified source. So let's jump into these questions, and I'm going to explain to you about how to think about answering each of these questions. Question number 1, why do you want to work for KPMG? Now, you'll notice at the start of this video, I went through about 6 or 7 different facts about KPMG. Now, this is really something that is not that difficult to put together. It could take you 10, 15 minutes to research through the company's website. One thing that I would suggest is you want to make your facts specific to the country where you are applying to. Now, what you don't want to do is give lazy and generic answers, because this isn't going to make you discernibly different from anybody else. What it is going to do is just make you sound the same. Now, the facts that I gave were specific, and they covered financials, human resources, charity projects, and awards. And there are lots of different types of facts that you could use. I suggest that you pick out 5 or 6 facts. If you want to make it personal, then you can relate it based upon something. So for example, if you're a woman and you're applying for KPMG, you could talk about the Gender Equity Award and how it appeals to you. One thing that you don't want to do is spend most of your answer talking about yourself, because that is besides the point of the question. It's all about, what do you know about KPMG and what effort have you put in to learn a little bit more about us. Now, as an extension of this question, which may not come up in your first round interview, but may come up later on down the line, and I know a lot of people struggle with, which is, what makes KPMG different from the other Big 4 professional services companies? Although this question appears to be different, it's actually almost the same, because if you're giving specific and not generic facts about KPMG, then you're demonstrating how they are different. But if you want to delve a little bit deeper into this, then you can look at their annual report, look at the chairman's statement, look at the managing partner's statement, or look at particular facts to do with the division that you are applying to. Now, again, this is something that's only going to take you about 15 minutes, and you don't need to read the whole annual report. Just pick out the facts that you like and then deliver those in your answer. Question number 2. Why do you want to do this job? Or what does a day in the life of this role look like? Now, these 2 questions are really very similar, and they can be broken down into 2 parts. The first and the second part can both be learned from the job description. Something that I highly recommend that you do when you're preparing for an interview for any company is to scrutinize the job description. This is as long as the job description is actually helpful, i.e. it tells you about key responsibilities, the things that that you would be doing on a daily basis, and also the skills and experiences that you need to be able to do this job well. Now, it could be when you're looking at this for KPMG that this isn't readily apparent. Maybe the job description doesn't provide a lot of information or is a bit too salesy, in which case what I suggest that you do is take the title of the job or a similar title if it's very specific to KPMG, pop that into Google and try and find other job descriptions where it's a little bit more descriptive about what you're going to be doing. Now, what are the two parts of answering that question? Well, part number one is really just about explaining what you're going to be doing in the job. This is very important if you're delivering a one-way video interview, because what happens in a higher view style interview or whatever the system or software it is that they're using is that your answers will be transcribed and the transcription will then be passed to look for particular keywords or phrases which show that you're a good match for the job. So they're actually using the job description that they have provided you as a marking scheme for your answer. Now, ideally, I'd say you want to spend about half your time talking about basically what is the job and what you'll be doing. The second half of your answer, you're going to want to take the time to pick out 2, 3, maybe even 4 key skills or experiences, say that you have them and provide the proof. This must be a specific and measurable fact. For example, if I was just to say, I'm really good at sales, the question that's probably going through your mind is, well, according to what? If I said to you, I'm good at sales because I spent 3 months as a double glazing telesales person, making 12 appointments a week and doing 600 cold calls a week based upon that. Now, all of a sudden we have proof, evidence that shows that we are good at the thing that we say we're good at, rather than otherwise it's really just our opinion. Question number 3, how do you make decisions? Now, this on the face of it doesn't appear to be a competency-based question. Competency-based questions tend to take the format of, tell me about a time when you, give me an example of teamwork, leadership, interpersonal skills. This is more like a strength-based question. So the initial reaction of most people when they get a question like this is really to say, well, I'm really good at making decisions, or I bear in mind, all the different factors that are involved in managing my time, and so on and so forth. But really, you can still use the STAR or the situation, task, action, result style of answer to fit this format of question. How do you make a decision? Well, before I make a decision, I make sure to have a reasoned and level approach in terms of what are the other factors that needs to go into making that decision. Do I have all the information available at my disposal? And what other things have I got on my schedule at that time that may affect my ability to commit to that decision? For example, there was a time when, and you can then provide your example of making a significant decision. Now, importantly, when you're talking about any skill in terms of a competency or a strength, you need to think to yourself, well, what is the premise of good decision making? There's really something that you can just pop into Google, or if you wanted blow by blow, step-by-step examples, then you can click the link down below for one of the courses, which is in our description, where we break this down for lots of different skills. But to be honest with you, if you're reasonably confident, then just buff up your answer a little bit by looking this up in Google. Question number 4, tell me about yourself and walk me through your CV. Now, the tell me about yourself question is probably the one that most people dread, because all of a sudden they're sitting there trying to think to themselves, who am I? What should I tell you about myself? Should I tell you about what I did yesterday? Should I tell you about what my hopes and dreams are? Now, a good way to prepare for this question is to have a structured answer. Now, the way that I have taught answering tell me about yourself for well over a decade now is, who are you and what are you doing now? What have you done in the past 3 to 5 years? What would you like to do in the future? Work experience, extracurricular skills and activities, and then finally, hobbies and other things that you like to do. Now, to be really good at doing this is something that requires some practice. One thing that I don't suggest that you do is try and answer this off the cuff. What generally tends to happen is when I ask people to tell me about themselves when they have one-to-one consults with me on Zoom, is that they just tap out after about 15 or 20 seconds and they don't know what else to say. Hi, my name's Mike. I'm currently a bachelor's student studying science and Hi, my name's Mike. I'm currently a bachelor's student studying economics at Imperial University. Prior to this, I did my A-levels at Surrey and Guilds Grammar School, where I got 3 A-levels. No, let's just scrap that. When you think about the second part of answering this question, which is walking me through your CV, this is pretty much the same thing. You're trying to walk somebody through in a chronological order based upon what you're doing now, what your work experience is, what your extracurricular activities and volunteering, and then what are your skills and interests. If you want to download this handout alongside a free CV template and many other things, then check out Application Success Secrets down in the description below. It's completely free for you to download. But one thing I really want to impress upon you is that nobody does a great personal introduction straight away. It takes practice. Not a lot, maybe doing it 3 times, 5 times, trying to do it without a script, because really it's about how you say it rather than what you say. If you deliver it in a really confident manner, you have a good opening and a good way that you close your personal introduction, which is why I tend to like to end it on hobbies or interests, because it provides a really great talking point, particularly if you're doing a face-to-face interview. Question number 5, tell me about a recent piece of business news or a great technology and how it would affect the job that you're working in or the clients that you deal with. Now, this is a more generalized way of looking at 2 different questions which we came across, which is tell me about a recent M&A deal, and also tell me about a technology that you believe will be helpful for the audit industry. So really, looking at these 2 things, we can look at commercial and business awareness and also technology and recent developments. Now, one thing that I highly recommend that you do, if you're not currently applying for jobs, but you're just watching this video because you're interested in doing this job or working at this company, is sign up for weekly bulletins from an industry news portal, whether that be something like Accountancy Age or the ICAEW website or a regulatory body, whatever country that you're working in. If you look up to see who is the regulatory body who's going to be delivering your professional qualification, as well as an industry news website that is churning out news as an aggregation service for the industry that you want to work in, whether that be more generalistically professional services or audit, tax, advisory or deals, then you should be up to date with what's going on within the industry. Technology questions are always a really good way to prepare, and in fact, if you read through KPMG's white papers, if you go and look at their technology consulting arm, or you look at their annual report, you'll be able to easily find out about new technology that they use, because shock horror, they're going to tell you all about it because they want to really bang on about the great technology that they're using, because that's a great way for them to attract customers. Now, I say weekly updates because you don't need to be fully up to date on a second-by-second basis or reading the Financial Times every day to really be able to answer this question comprehensively. What you do want to do is select a subject that you feel happy talking about and potentially could answer a question on, i.e. you could easily explain it to your mum or dad and then answer the questions that they may have. This is a really good way to frame this to make it easy for you to pick something out. Question number 6, describe a time when you had to overcome a conflict or a challenge within a team. Now, a conflict or a challenge is basically a disagreement on what to do or how to proceed with something. Now, you would answer this using the STAR format, and I think a really important way to think about resolving a conflict or a challenge is, first of all, where were you? What were you doing? What was the challenge or conflict? And importantly, why is it significant? For example, say you're doing a project at university on a particular company that you need to carry out a piece of financial analysis on, but you can't agree on the company. Well, it's a significant conflict or challenge because if you guys can't agree, then you're not going to be able to move forward for the project. So how did you actively listen to the other person's concerns? How did you make sure that they feel heard? How did you move forward to getting it resolved? Did you have a vote? Did you sit down and have an adult discussion about something? And then based upon that, what did you then do to make sure that you got the result that you needed to achieve in the project or the general workplace scenario? And finally, question number 7, give me a time when you had to use an analytical approach. Now really, this is a question about problem solving. Give me a time when you solved a problem, give me a time when you thought of a new and innovative way to do something. These are all the same types of problem. So you're going to use your situation, task, action, result. When thinking about an analytical approach, a problem or a challenge, think about something that was difficult for you to do. It wasn't just something you fixed straight away, but maybe you had to go back and forth a little bit. Maybe you had to say, look, I'll get back to you and go away and do your research. Think about something with the same level or similar level of difficulty to doing a university dissertation. A lot of times when I listen or read example scripts of people who've answered this question, I tend to find the challenges are not really significant enough. So we really want to make sure that we can communicate that we have dealt with this in an analytical way, because we had to get different sources of information. We had to, whether that be, people, places, things, books, etc., in order to enable us to solve this problem effectively. And finally, what was the result that you needed to achieve? What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Ready English here with another video to help you get hired, bringing you another pass the interview video for PwC in 2024. Yes, the long awaited video is here. We have done more research, we have gone more in depth, and we want to deliver you the very best value for anybody who is watching this preparing for their PwC first round interview. So first of all, who is PwC for people who don't know? Well, PwC is one of the big four professional services companies along with Deloitte, EY and KPMG. In 2022, they generated over $50 billion in annual revenue. They employ over 300,000 people and they have over 600 locations across the world. And they deliver services such as audit, tax, advisory and deals, along with a multitude of other services which sit within those four business brackets. So what can you expect from your PwC interview? Well, it really depends whether you're watching this as a graduate or you're watching this as a professional. If you're a graduate, then you can expect a higher view video interview. Now, this is going to change country by country, and obviously we can't make a video for every single country all around the world. So we're going to break it down into two different types of interviews, which is one-way video, where you're basically recording yourself, or a live interview where you're actually being asked questions, whether that be over the telephone, via video, or face-to-face. Now, what's the difference? Not that much, to be frankly honest with you. If you're having a higher view video interview, then you could still expect 6 to 7 questions, 3 minutes to answer, and some potential special cases which may change, which I'm going to cover at the end of this video. If you're doing a live interview, whether that be video, telephone, or face-to-face, this could run a little bit longer. It could be 30 minutes, could be 45 or even 60 minutes. But I would say in general, it would be really unlikely for you to experience more than 12 to 13 questions. In my experience of preparing people for interviews for world famous companies for now 11 years, it's very unlikely in any interview that you're going to get more than 7 or 8 questions, because particularly when it's delivered live, this process has to be repeated over and over again. And there are some tweaks and nuances to this as you get more senior in your role. So now I want to take you through the most common questions which we came across from our research from publicly available sources for interviews that have been held in 2024 and how to think about answering those questions. And also I'm going to be taking you through a framework for answering situational judgment questions, which actually comes from our Sorting SJT Questions course, which you can find as part of the Pass the Interview pack down in the description below. SJT questions are something that we found a lot of people have struggled with, and it's something that seems to come up a lot for PwC interviews. So during the course of this video, I'm actually going to walk you through the 6-step framework. We're going to look at a question together and how to think about answering it. Question number 1, why do you want to work for PwC? Now, whatever the company, whatever the role, you should probably expect to be asked this question within the first 3 questions. Now, when you're answering why PwC, I always want you to think about 5 fast facts. Now, you'll notice that I already gave 3 of those when I was introducing PwC, namely that they had over $50 billion in annual revenue, over 300,000 people work for them, and they have over 600 global locations. And here's a couple of other facts from our PwC fact sheet. PwC serves over 190,000 clients worldwide. Included within these clients are over 80% of the Fortune 500 companies. PwC's charitable foundation and grant making has delivered over £200 million to worthwhile causes. And in terms of ESG, PwC has begun to have a conversation with its staff and senior members within the business about whether their compensation and remuneration packages should be linked to ESG targets to make it even more important than it already has been for them. Now, these are just a few examples of what I call specific facts that you can go and find yourself. You could go onto PwC's website. You could go to PwC's annual report. Now, depending on the country where you're going to be doing your PwC interview, I do recommend that you pick out facts which are specific to the country. Now, this is something that's only going to take you about 15 minutes to do in your research. If you want a little bit more of a breakdown about how to answer why this company, then click the link up above where I break this down for you and also provide a free worksheet which you can print out and write out the answer for yourself. But the main thing is, what we're trying to avoid is just ruthlessly vague answers that could be said for any company. I really want to work for PwC because it's a big, world famous professional services company where I would be exposed to an amazing team and get to work on exciting projects for big companies. Now, you could say that about any professional services company. In fact, you could say that about any multinational company. So try and make those 5 fast facts specific to PwC. And you may even want to relate 1 or 2 of them to yourself. Maybe there's something that they're doing for ESG or for diversity or inclusion that really resonates with you and your background. And that's a good way to add your personal spin onto it. One thing I would say is don't try to talk too much about yourself, what you want, what you like. The company's not that interested. The basic concept for this is, have you done your homework? Do you actually know why you want to work for us? In fact, an audit associate who accepted a job at PwC just last month actually said it's going to be really helpful if you put more research into the company and the role, because you're going to get asked about it a lot. Question number 2, why do you want to do this job? Now, when you're being asked why do you want to do this job, the most common response is, it's a fantastic opportunity and I'd be really good at this and I know how to do this and I know how to do that and I've got all this experience. Where people tend to go wrong is they really don't identify what it is they would do for the job. They don't lay out the daily duties and responsibilities. They don't lay out the skills that they would need. And therefore, from the interviewer's mind or from the higher view algorithm, which is essentially passing your response for keywords, you haven't said anything about why you want to do the job. Now, something that I want you to think about is the interviewer's mind is like a checklist of can you do this or objections that they're going to be going through. So say, for example, you're applying for a job to be an auditor. Then in their mind, or in the algorithm's mind, it's going to say, do they have numerical skills? Do they have attention to detail? Have they worked with clients? Do they want to study or even know about the ACAs? Are they good with finance? So essentially what you're trying to lay out in your answer about why you want to do this job is to say, hey, Mr. Interviewer, this is what I'm going to do in the job, and these are the 2 or 3 skills that I think are most important to you, and here's a quick sentence about why I'm really good at that skill. Now, proof is really important because sometimes when I hear people talking about skills, they'll just give a long list of skills. And of course, the person sitting there thinking, well, how do I know that you're actually any good at it? It's like a really braggy kid in primary school who says that they can do everything and their dad is Batman. And you're left there thinking, yeah, but is any of this really true? Because you seem to be mostly full of whenever you talk. So if you're saying that you've got really good numerical skills, provide some proof. What's something that you've done or something that you've achieved that can really demonstrate to anybody that you have good numerical skills? For an in-depth look about how to answer this question, the 2 parts that I recommend, and to download a free worksheet, click the link up above for my most recent video about why do you want to work for this company. Question number 3, how do the company values align with you Or what is an example that you can give that align with one of PwC's core values? Now recently this is a change that I've noticed in my prep work with people one-to-one talking about PwC, where we have seen a resurrection of values-based questions. Now if you didn't know, core values are the core ideals, pillars or principles that guide each company, and they contain the language that is very important to the thread of how that company operates. They also tend to be the underpinning and almost the answer matrix to any company's interview process. So if you're really thinking, well, what's really important to the company? Look at their core values. The problem that I often find with core values is that most companies' core values are kind of the same. Excellence, integrity, sustainability, and so on and so forth. However, some companies like PwC provide a bit more language to their core values. Value number 1, active integrity. Speak up for what is right, especially when it feels difficult. Expect and deliver the highest quality outcomes. Make decisions and act as if our personal reputations were at stake. So acting with integrity is essentially doing the right thing. This also is a good indicator for other questions that you might get. If you're wondering about behavioural questions, for example, tell me about a time when you did what was right. Tell me about a time when you delivered a project to the highest quality. Tell me about a time when you made a decision which acted against your personal interests. Number 2, make a difference. Stay informed and ask questions about the future of the world we live in. Create impact of our colleagues, our clients and society for our actions. Respond with agility to the ever-changing environment in which we operate. Tell me about a time when you were curious and asked good questions. Tell me about a demonstration of your teamwork. Tell me about a time when you have been flexible and adaptable. Number 3, care. Make the effort to understand every individual and what matters to them. Recognise the value that each person contributes. Support others to grow and work in the ways that bring out their best. Tell me about a time when you resolved a conflict. Tell me about a time when you have built a relationship or supported somebody else. 4, work together. Collaborate and share relationships, ideas and knowledge beyond boundaries. Seek and integrate a diverse range of perspectives, people and ideas. Give and ask for feedback to improve ourselves. Tell me about a time when you've worked with others. Tell me about a time when you've demonstrated leadership. Tell me about a time when you have changed your mind or changed your opinion. Tell me about a time when you have received constructive feedback. And 5, reimagine the impossible. Dare to challenge the status quo and try new things. Innovate, test and learn from failure. Have an open mind to the possibilities in every idea. Tell me a time when you've overcome a difficult challenge. Tell me a time when you have failed. Tell me a time when you have demonstrated an innovative idea. Now I realise as we're unpacking those core values you think, holy cow, there's a lot of questions contained within that. But in fact, very often, and this is a really important point for me to highlight, companies will already kind of tell you what questions they're going to ask without knowing that they're telling you. They will tell you through the job description, i.e. what are the skills that are required for the job, and also through their core values. When you're answering questions like these, what you want to do is use the STAR format, which is situation, task, action, result. Last year, in my second year at university, I was taking a maths degree. As part of my maths degree, I had to work as a team of 4 to carry out a computational analysis of. That's a situation and task. Now in the action where you're outlining, for example, teamwork, you pick out 4 or 5 key ideals which really demonstrate that you know good teamwork. Talking to others, communicating, going above and beyond, demonstrating leadership, dividing resources, and then finally you would have your result. Now one thing I want to say is that when you're answering questions in a STAR format, make sure that the majority of your answer is in the action. I would suggest 70%. Now we tend to use what we call STAR stories, which is a simple, repeatable method to use the same stories over and over again to answer many different behavioural questions. If you want to find out more about what these are and how to do these yourself, then check out the PwC interview pack down in the answer below. One thing that I would say, just as a little tip, is it is highly advisable that you don't try to invent a different story for every single type of behavioural question. This is going to leave you with pages and pages of scripts, not enough time to learn everything or to practice it. And really the most important thing that you can do for your interview is practice speaking out loud. The next two questions are examples of common competency questions that we found coming up. And I just want to introduce you to a way of thinking about how you would answer these questions. Question number 4, describe a difficult situation you encountered with your team and how you overcame it. Now, the first thing to point out about this is that it should be a genuinely difficult situation which involves multiple steps to solve. So for example, this could be a changing deadline, this could be a client who has added additional work, it could be an unexpected circumstance like a team member dropping out, but it should have 2 or 3 steps to solve the challenge. Now when you're providing examples for competency questions using the STAR format, ideally you should always use a work-based example, if not something from extracurricular or voluntary activities, and then after that you can use your academics. That's not to say if you don't have any more experience than academic that you shouldn't use that, but ultimately the best experience that you can provide is one that is closest to the one that you're going to do. So work for work, or work without pay for work, and then academics is not really something that's going to differentiate you too much from your competition, but you use the experience that you have. Now really importantly, you want to outline the steps that you had to take for solving the difficulty that your team faced. A very common problem that I find that people have, particularly younger people, is they're not very good storytellers. So they'll tell a story something like, we had a team member who was sick, so we just did the work ourselves, the end. I mean, it's not a great story, is it? So you might outline that and say, look, I spoke to Steve, and he was actually ill and told me that he wouldn't be able to do the work for the next week. What this meant was that we had a significant part of the project which wasn't going to get done. I then spoke to our other teammates, let them know what Steve had said, asked Steve to send over the work that he had already done, and suggested that we meet in person with the remaining members of the team to understand how we could divide up the tasks. As a result of the meeting, now you'll notice that I'm really breaking down the steps of the process. Both stories are true, but one goes into more detail and essentially creates a series of pictures that somebody can see as I'm going through. Another way to think about this, and something that I find always really helps professionals when they're trying to condense large amounts of experience into small amounts of time in interview questions, is to think, how would I teach this? So if you teach somebody something, you have to break it down step by step. Much like teaching somebody a recipe as a cook. You wouldn't just say, right, first you make the chocolate cake and then you put the chocolate cake in the oven, because the person who's never made chocolate cake is going to be like, yeah, I don't know how to make chocolate cake. And you're like, oh, first you've got to buy the ingredients, then, well, what ingredients do I buy? Oh, okay, so you've got to buy this. Well, how much of the ingredients have I got to buy? And if you break it down into its simplest elements, then it becomes very easy for you to explain this in a competency question. Question number 5, tell me about a time you messed up and how you fixed it. Now, something that I know that a lot of candidates really don't like answering are what I call negative interview questions. And negative interview questions essentially give a connotation that you're not amazing and perfect and the best thing ever. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake. Tell me about a time when you had to do something again. Tell me about a time when you changed an idea about something. Tell me about your biggest weakness. And a lot of people will give answers that I deem to be a little bit flimsy or false, or actually are answers that can't really be delivered with conviction because they're not true. Here's a little tip. If you're lying, we can tell. Not because we can tell that you're lying, but we can tell because you look really bored and disinterested as you're giving your answer. Now, for me, it's always best to err on the side of the truth, or just tell the truth, but you don't have to reveal a significant error or mistake. For example, you may have gotten a poor score in an exam. You may not have done so well in a group project. You may have been late to work once. You might have been ill. These are things that anybody can go through. And the most important thing about this, and actually for all negative questions, is what have you done to get better at this thing? And what lessons have you learned, or what lesson have you taken away to make sure that you improve? The reason why negative interview questions exist is because, number one, it really helps us to get a 360-degree view of you, not just what is good, but also what do you think could be better. And number two, which I think is much more interesting in terms of understanding a candidate's emotional maturity, is just to see how people self-assess. We all have weaknesses, we all have blind spots. And if a candidate is unable to do that, then potentially they're not going to be able to do that when it comes to real work, where they're going to have to learn and make mistakes. And this is going to be difficult not only for the candidate, but also for the people who have to work with them and the person who has to manage them. So these last two sections are something a little bit different that I want to introduce, which really talks about the nuances of individual companies' application processes. Now, the first part is talking about situational judgment questions, which is something that I find people really struggle with. And the second part is just special cases or interesting things that I noticed that came up in candidate memories, which I just want to bring to your attention, because if you don't know about it, you can't prepare for it. But if you do, then based upon the role or the country or the place that you're going to apply to, then you can make adjustments and start to prepare for that. So first of all, let's talk about situational judgment questions. Now, situational judgment questions are possibly something that you've come across already when you've done SJT style tests, a situational judgment test, which is basically based upon this situation, how would you rank your responses from 1 to 5, or what's the best and the worst? However, PwC has spent quite a few years now, 2 or 3 years, where basically they have asked people to respond directly on video based upon situational judgment test questions. And I find that this is something which is becoming increasingly popular and people tend to struggle with. So what I want to do with you now is actually read out an example question and then take you through a process to think about how you would answer this question. You work in a large audit firm as a consultant. There are 5 additional members in the team, all working under the supervision of a team manager and the department manager above him. Matt, a co-worker in your staff with whom you share an office, needs your advice regarding a report he is about to present at this week's team meeting. These meetings are led by your team manager, but the department manager is almost always present too. Although the part of the report that Matt shows you seems fine, you notice that the numerical analysis in another section of the report is missing important conclusions. You can tell that this section of the report does not adhere to the standards of your department supervisors. Matt seems to be confident about that part of the report, and you get the impression that he is not interested in your opinion about it. What would you do in this situation? Now, there's quite a lot going on in this question, and actually I find that this is indicative of the types of questions that I've seen on different job-based simulations for a variety of companies. Something that I find really useful and that runs through all of our courses is what I call frameworks. So a framework is just a series of steps or principles that you can use which apply across the board to a category or a type of question that you're going to answer. And this is something that we first introduced when we released our SJT Sorted course 2 years ago. And the reason why I released this course is that I had clients who were coming to me who had done SJT questions and said that they really were struggling about how to rank and order their responses. So they wanted me to create a framework that they could think of, and the SJT Sorted course is actually included in the Pass the Interview pack. But what I want to do with you today is just pick out a 6-step framework which comes as part of a 1-page cheat sheet for how to think about SJT questions. So this is actually step 2 in a framework to answer any SJT questions. And step 2 is called what's the context? Number 1, who is involved? Number 2, what do they need? Number 3, who gets priority if there is more than one person? Number 4, what are your responsibilities and obligations? Number 5, what is your position and the extent of your authority? Number 6, what is the wider context of the role you are applying to in real life? Now, this is a really useful way for breaking down questions and thinking about who's involved. So let's break down the question that we just heard. So the quick summary is Matt's fudged the report, and now it's up to you to either say, yeah, Matt, I don't think that's right, or just to become complicit in his error by saying nothing. Now, bearing in mind in SJT questions, doing nothing is almost never the right thing to do. Right? You want to be active in your responses. So who's involved? Well, there's Matt, there's the manager, there's the department manager, there's you, and ultimately there's a client involved because the report is for somebody, right? What do they need? Well, they need the best work. They need the report to be correct. Who gets priority if there is more than one person? Well, ultimately in the hierarchy of most MNCs, the client gets the priority. and then it will be the most senior person within your team who is present within the question. What is your position and the extent of your authority? Well, you're a graduate. So you're just like Matt, you don't have any authority over him, so you could say something to him and then really it's down to him whether he does something, but they've already said in the answer that he's not really interested in what you think. And what's the wider context? Well, the wider context is he's made a mistake, or you think that he's made a mistake, right? So how do we go about answering this? Well, first of all, you've got to say something to Matt. Right. So first of all, what I would do is prior to the presentation we've been given, I'd ask Matt if he had 5 minutes to sit down with me. I would actually go through the figures myself to double check my thinking around the numerical calculations and to show Matt where I think he has gone wrong. This also gives him the opportunity to respond because he may have information available to me that I have not seen myself. In which case this means that the error is mine, my perception, and therefore the presentation can continue. However, if it proves correct that I reveal errors within the numerical calculations and Matt still feels that this is something that he wants to push on with and he's not interested in what I think, then I would have no option but to escalate this to my manager and to bring it to their attention. I would send them an email, or I would find a moment to sit down with them, and I would then hand that over to my manager to let them to make the decision. Now ultimately, whether they choose to let the departmental manager know is up to them. But that would be my first point of contact, and also to offer this solution to this problem so that they have something in place so that the presentation can be fixed for the client or whoever it's meant for. Now you've noticed that I've been quite methodical as I'm going through my answer. I'm also thinking about hierarchy. I'm thinking about not jumping to conclusions, because I've noticed with responses to a lot of situational judgment questions, people will really jump to conclusions. So they'll go, well, I'd report Matt, or I'd throw, basically, you know, in the UK we call it throwing someone under the bus. So you'd just be like, oh Matt, you're wrong, and throw him in front of a bus. Now, the point is, you could be wrong. You're wrong. No, I'm joking, I don't really know. But you could be wrong, your data could be wrong, you could get the wrong end of the stick. So really you need to sit down with Matt and go, hey dude, like I'm just going through these calculations and they just don't look right to me. But maybe I'm getting the wrong end of the stick. So this is what I came up with. Now if it turns out that Matt is wrong and he's like, look man, I'm cool, I'm still going to go ahead with it anyway, then you're like, well, Matt, I've really given you the opportunity to make this right. I haven't let anybody else know. I've brought it to you. I've even fixed it for you so you could just put it in. But if Matt is basically willfully and knowingly carrying out an error or a mistake which could have a material impact on other people, then this is the time when you need to go to your manager and say, look, I've sat down with Matt. I've pointed this out to him. These numerical calculations are wrong. I've actually gone through it. This is what the right calculation should be. I have tried to speak to him myself. Can I give this to you? And your manager's going to be like, cool, I'm going to deal with it. You get on with your work. This is now down to me because that's what I get paid, the big bucks. And then your manager goes and does whatever he needs to do. And that's a really good way to think about answering situational judgment questions, that 6-step framework. And if you want to find out more about that framework and some examples and lots of other cool things for how to answer SJTs, make sure you check that out. It's either individually, it's our SJT Sorted course, or it's contained within many of our packs, including the PwC Pass the Interview pack. Now finally, there were a couple of special cases of things that we came across in our research, which we really just wanted to point out to you. And there were essentially for me 3 things that it came down to. Number 1 was about writing an email. Number 2 was about doing a small case study. And number 3 was about commercial awareness. Now, each of these cropped up in different countries. For example, we saw commercial awareness pop up for the Middle East. We saw case studies pop up in the US, and we saw emails pop up in the UK. Now, for each of these, commercial awareness is really just about knowing your industry, knowing about what's going on, just signing up to some sort of weekly bulletin. One thing you don't need is a really in-depth knowledge of the ins and outs, but just a basic understanding of the movers and shakers and the mechanics of that industry. When it comes to doing case studies, we are talking about a short case study. In fact, in the PwC Pass the Interview Pack for 2024, I have put in a walkthrough simple case study, which is highly representative of something we've seen quite a lot with PwC, which is these short style 10-minute case studies with a 2 or 3 minute presentation afterwards. So that will actually outline, as I walk you through, how to answer that case study, what you should say and what you should pick out the figures, make sure that you're really obsessing about the numbers and the facts and removing your opinion. Now finally, for writing an email, the most important thing about writing a business email is just what are the exact points that you want to carry across. Can you keep it as brief as possible, and also to make yourself available. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really wanted to return to a longer form style format that we originally started out with in 2021. Please hit like, drop me a comment down below what company you'd like us to do next. Do let me know what you think about the video, because of course what you say and how you interact with us helps us to know what videos are popular and what videos aren't. And the more popular they are for you guys, our audience, the more I'm going to do of them. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I wish you the best of luck. See ya.